Hi everybody, thank you for joining us in Alumina today. We'll begin with some opening statements from the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Trade and Defence, Alumina, and our Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, and then we'll take some questions.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome to Ivy House. In particular, it is a pleasure to welcome High Representative Kaja Kallas to Ivy House and to Dublin today. And I really do look forward to working with you and to working with all of your team in the months ahead. As you all know, tomorrow we will publish Ireland's presidency programme centred on our three key priorities essential to Europe's future: competitiveness, values and our security, all of which are very much interlinked. And I think these priorities reflect both the challenges that we face, but of course the opportunities that we must seize working together. I also look forward to welcoming Kaja and her team and many other colleagues back to Ireland for the informal meeting of Defence Ministers and also for the informal Gymnich meeting of Foreign Affairs Ministers that will happen early in the new term. Standing firmly with Ukraine will be one of Ireland's defining priorities during our presidency. Europe's support for Ukraine must remain unwavering for as long as it takes. Today we discussed the EU support for Ukraine, the work that has been done to date, and of course the need for us to maintain pressure on Russia to end this conflict, including through robust sanctions. And we, of course, discussed the issue of Alumina, and I've made it very clear that our support remains firmly with Ukraine and that once the investigation that is underway concludes, that information will be provided to the Commission and we will work directly with them. We will ensure that any decisions that need to be taken to put pressure on Russia, that they will have the full support of Ireland. I saw myself firsthand the extraordinary courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people during our visit in March this year. Ensuring Ukraine continues to receive that political, financial and military support that it needs will be high on my agenda. Advancing the EU's common work on security and defence will be a key priority, and we've had a good exchange on these issues as well. Strengthening Europe's security and defence is no longer a future challenge, it is an immediate responsibility. Ireland also has a long-standing commitment to peace and stability in Lebanon through our partnership with UNIFIL, and we will take a leading role in the EU discussions on the next phase of international support for Lebanon, working closely with our EU partners to ensure that there is that continued engagement and presence on the ground of our troops that reinforces the stability that is needed. We welcome the work in the EU security strategy as well as the defence readiness through the White Paper and Readiness Roadmaps 2030 process. Maritime security will be a particular area of focus throughout our presidency, including efforts to enhance our maritime domain awareness, protect critical infrastructure and strengthen resilience in our shared maritime environment. And I look forward to discussing these matters across a number of the Council formation. The situation in the Middle East, of course, was firmly on today's agenda. The resumption of conflict between Iran and Israel at the weekend is deeply concerning. We agreed the need for a negotiated outcome, the importance of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and the need to address the range of regional security issues. We're working closely with our Gulf partners, as we have done in recent meetings, who continue to be directly impacted by Iran's attacks. The situation in Lebanon, as I've mentioned, continues to be deeply concerning. Hezbollah's attacks on Israel are completely unacceptable. However, Israel's military response is completely disproportionate, and so the EU must put its collective weight behind Lebanon's sovereignty, humanitarian needs and recovery. Development cooperation and humanitarian assistance will also be important priorities throughout our presidency. As the world's largest provider of development assistance, the EU has a vital leadership role to play in addressing poverty and humanitarian need, and Minister Richmond will progress that committee, supported by Kaja and her team. Today we also discussed Palestine, the humanitarian catastrophe continuing to unfold in Gaza, where civilians have endured unimaginable suffering, and of course we must not lose sight of the situation in the West Bank, where settlement expansion and settler violence continues to threaten the viability of the two-state solution. That is why here in Ireland, at home, our government, I as Minister, have moved forward with legislation to ban trade in the illegal settlements, and tomorrow I will introduce the Israeli Settlements Bill into the Dáil. I also hope that action at an EU level will be possible, and this is something that we discussed today. I continue to call for a proposal that would prohibit trade at EU level with settlements in the West Bank. I believe that this is the best way in which we can bring forward a peaceful solution and the objective of a two-state solution. But again, can I just reiterate my thanks to Kaja, to all of her team, and to say that I look forward to working with you, not just on these matters, but on so many other matters as they arise in the 6 months ahead. And I look forward to a successful presidency with you and your team. Thank you.
Yes, dear Helen, thank you for having us here in Dublin today, just a few weeks before you start your presidency. Your presidency priorities reflect exactly what Europe needs, defending our values, strengthening our security, and boosting our competitiveness. Europe must remain a principled global actor. But principles alone are not enough. Europe must also have the hard power to defend them. That means investing in our security, strengthening our defense capabilities, and building the capacity to protect our citizens and our interests. Ireland's proud tradition of military neutrality is not in question. But neutrality does not provide immunity from the threats Europe faces today. No country in Europe is off Russia's target list. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we have seen a surge in the hybrid attacks and sabotage, including against critical infrastructure such as the undersea water cables. As EU defense ministers discussed yesterday, Russia's shadow fleet represents a serious threat. These vessels smuggle sanctioned oil, endanger the maritime environment, and act as launch pads for hybrid attacks. Russian Navy vessels also have repeatedly been caught near critical data and energy cables. We cannot afford complacency. Greater investment in maritime capabilities is essential to keep our countries safe. In February, Ireland launched its first maritime security strategy, setting out the plan to better protect its interests at sea. Ireland's commitments to increase defence spending by 55% by 2030 sends a clear signal that Ireland is stepping up. We also discussed the developments in the Middle East. There is a fragile pause now, and hopefully parties will reach an agreement soon. A return to full-scale war would be and would come at a tremendous cost to the entire region. A continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz is unacceptable. Its repercussions extend far beyond the region, disrupting the global economy and threatening food supplies. Lebanon, where thousands of European troops serve under the UNIFIL mission, remains close to the brink. Recent months have been exceptionally difficult for all troop-contributing countries, with peacekeepers operating under increasing threat by Hezbollah. The service and dedication of UNIFIL personnel deserves our respect and gratitude. I want to also acknowledge Ireland's long-standing contribution to peace, stability and security in Lebanon. In Gaza and the West Bank, the humanitarian and political outlook remains dire. To increase the pressure, EU foreign ministers last month imposed sanctions on Israeli extremist settlers and leading Hamas figures. Last week, Ireland imposed travel bans on Israeli ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. Proposals to impose sanctions on the EU level are currently under discussion among member states. And finally, Minister McEntee and I discussed how we can further strengthen our support for Ukraine. I want to thank Ireland for making Ukraine its priority during presidency. We all want this war to end, above all, Ukrainians themselves. But the reality is that there are no signs that Putin is ready to end his invasion. So we need to keep backing Ukraine. Today, we presented proposals for the 21st sanctions package. This includes a temporary freeze to its Russian oil price cap and measures against institutions used by Moscow to circumvent EU sanctions, including banks, oil traders, refineries, and crypto operators in third countries. The EU will continue to target Russian revenues to force Moscow to end its war. But we need to deprive Russia not only of the money, but also the assets that they need to fund this war. The minister and I also discussed reports that sanctioned Russian defense companies may be benefiting from significant volumes of Irish aluminium imports. As the minister said, investigations into these allegations are ongoing. Alumina is not currently covered by the EU sanctions. Europe must close all loopholes, tighten sanctions enforcement, and ensure our commitments are backed by deeds. No European products should end up in drones and missiles that kill Ukrainian civilians. Dear Helen, Ireland's presidency comes at an important time for Europe. We look forward to working closely together and really stand ready to everything we can do to make your presidency a success. Thank you very much.
Vice President, in Cyprus you spoke about the need to find creative ways to stop the war in Ukraine. In that case, given the reports linking alumina from Ireland to the weapons supply chain in Russia, why was alumina not included in the latest round of sanctions? And on the Irish government's investigation into all this, are you satisfied with how it is going, or will the European Commission be launching its own investigation into the matter?
Thank you very much. The investigations are ongoing, and for us it's important that we get the facts straight. No, we are trusting the Irish government to do these investigations. Why wasn't it included? In the 21st package, we have a huge list of companies, included also, crypto that we haven't had in that amount before, oil refineries and all. It is always a question, what more can we do? And I think this case shows that we should also look into this, that the material that Russia needs to continue with its war, whether it's different types of metals, whether it's the oil refinery products that they need. We need to look and we have to be creative in coming up with the next sanctions, because our aim is that this war will end, and it will also end if the aggressor runs out of either money or material to continue.
Estonia has been pushing for alumina to be included in the sanctions package. Is it possible it could be in the 22nd round of sanctions?
Yes, there are member states who have been pushing, but eventually it is all the member states that need to agree, and so far it hasn't been in the sanctions, yes.
Suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement and taking other actions around Israel. Is there a change in attitude? Are you moving towards that? Is what the Irish government has been picking up on true?
Yeah. Well, there is certainly a change of attitude. The question is whether it's enough, because we need, for the sanctions, for example, we need all the countries to agree. We don't have that. When it comes to the trade issues, we need qualified majority. And as you know, it's a very complicated way of calculating it, but we don't have that either at the moment. So clearly there are countries who are moving, and we see also public opinion that is increasingly critical in member states that haven't been so critical before. So as we are all democracies, governments also depend on their public opinion. So yes, clearly we see shifts, but the question is whether it's enough to move forward.
Can you just comment, I suppose, you're under pressure at home to enact the Occupied Territories Bill and whatever form that takes in the end stage. Are you frustrated with the lack of movement from your EU counterparts to move forward at EU level, which you as the government has said would have way more of an impact?
Well, look, I'll introduce the second stage of the legislation tomorrow, and I look forward to working closely with all parties and all colleagues across all sides of the House to progress this as soon as possible. I'm doing this in tandem with a number of other EU member states, notably our colleagues in the Netherlands and Belgium. Our colleagues in Norway are moving also, and obviously Spain has moved to introduce legislation. At a European level, look, I've been at the Council since November, and in that short space of time, I have seen a significant shift in the response from member states, in the language from member states, but also in the views of member states as to what should happen next. And as the High Representative, as Kaja has alluded to or mentioned at the last meeting, there was unanimity and full support to impose sanctions on violent settlers in the West Bank. There was unanimity to support sanctions on those responsible for the October 7th attacks. So that is a significant shift and change that hasn't happened for some time. There are, of course, a number of options still on the table, most notably the Commission proposal from last year that would ban the trade element of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. What I've also been advocating for, although this has not happened yet, is that a further proposal from the Commission would be put on the table that would specifically ban trade in the illegal occupied territories, and I believe that this would have a greater level of support from Member States, not unanimity, but I do believe that that would have a greater chance of receiving QMV voting and support from Member States. So I've certainly seen that shift. I have said time and time again, I believe that the only way that we can bring about change and a direction change from the Israeli government is where the EU responds collectively as a whole. That hasn't happened as often as we'd like to date, but certainly I will work with colleagues over the next while. I'll continue to progress the legislation at home, and in the meantime, obviously, our wish and our objective is that there is a peaceful solution found, not just between Israel and Palestine, but what's happening now in Lebanon, and also what's happening in the wider conflict with Iran also. Okay, thank you.